line. Over there, over there. Send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drums rum-tumming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back till it's over, over there, over there, over there. Send the word over.
Hey everybody, this is Joshua Littrell, and thank you so much for joining us on the Honor Across Arms podcast. Today, I am lucky enough to be joined in studio with an amazing young lady named Linda J. Littrell, who just happens to be my wife, and she's also an active duty Air Force member. Linda, how are you doing today?
I'm fabulous, Joshua. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. I can't say thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule here. It's holiday weeks. We got Thanksgiving coming up, and thanks so much for joining us on this podcast today, too. The Honor Across Arms podcast is really to help people understand what it's like to serve in the military, and what are some of the decisions that help us drive our decision to join the military, too. So if you wouldn't mind, first and foremost, let's give the listeners a little geographical location of where you're at today.
Today, I'm in Orlando because it's my husband's birthday week, and we're visiting family and joining them in a golf resort, spending the week with a much-needed vacation. But we're stationed in Middle Georgia at Robins Air Force Base.
At Robins Air Force Base. Now, where are you from originally?
Reading, Pennsylvania. That's Reading, spelled like reading, but it's pronounced Reading.
Like the Reading Railroad on Monopoly that I grew up saying wrong.
Yes, Joshua. Thank you for clarifying that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Linda, you joined the military 20 years ago, and you and I met in tech school at Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio.
It was,
20 years.
Yeah,
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I know.
It's crazy. So tell us what you've been doing for the last 20 years.
Oh, boy.
I understand you've been all over the world. What was your very first duty station?
My very first duty station was Aviano Air Base, Italy. That's in the northern part of the boot. And I was very fortunate as a first-term airman to get that overseas assignment. I took a chance. A lot of young folks, I was 18 at the time, a lot of young folks didn't want to necessarily leave home and get that far away, but I took a chance and went for it and got selected. So that was my first duty station.
You know, I think that point that you just made is something that very few people understand, that those orders that come down that tell us where we're going, that happened in tech school. Mm-hmm. And I remember there were some people there that were terrified of going overseas and seeing something new and leaving the United States, right?
Yeah.
So how did you make that adjustment? I mean, you're coming from Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Had you been outside the country at that point in time?
No, I hadn't.
Wow.
But
so you've never been outside the country?
No, and when and we're talking about 1999, before the days of instant Google and all these avenues to see outside of our own four walls. So back then, my only impression of Italy was Sylvester Stallone and you know, like what the movies showed. So I went over there thinking they would all look like him, talk like him, and there would be meatballs the size of softballs, and I went over there very naive.
So you didn't find a meatball the size of softball? But you looked hard, I'm sure.
I did. It turns out they do not do meatballs in Italy. They do not have garlic bread there. And
okay, wait. You just blew my mind. I didn't know that for sure.
No, they do not serve butter with their bread. They serve olive oil and herbs, and it's an adjustment, but it's a healthy and it's a healthy adjustment. And once I got over that hump, I was pleasantly surprised.
How'd you get over that hump, Linda? When you go to another country, I'm sure that's it's a little overwhelming at times, but how did you get involved and immersed in the country, if you will?
They have the military, well, the Air Force, I can't speak for all the branches, but the Air Force has a welcome week, if you will, when you're a newcomer at any base. At Robins, we had our newcomers brief, and that was a day. At Aviano, they had it for a whole week where they had host nationals come in, and they gave us some brief language barrier training, and told us, basic greetings and how to purchase stuff on the economy. And they gave us cultural awareness training as far as what was considered rude or acceptable there. That
will you expand on that for a little bit, because that cultural awareness is something that normal people just don't go through. So
Sure.
When we go to another country, is there training? Is there some oversight? What is that cultural awareness training that you're talking about? What does that entail?
Well, it depends on what culture and country you're in. In Italy, it was more about acceptable presentation and dress outside on the economy, and how they view people in stores. In America, we go in grabbing everything, and we need to touch and feel and smell. In Italy, and this was 20 years ago, so things may have changed. When I was there, if we went in and started grabbing at stuff, it was they didn't like that very much. They wanted to know how they could help you, and if you weren't there to buy for certain, they did not appreciate your presence.
Yeah.
And in Kuwait, we had a Kuwaiti breakfast, and we were told the ROEs, and we would go in with the Kuwaiti.
Before you move any further,
Sure.
What's an ROE?
Oh, thank you. Rules of engagement, and what we were to expect when we got there. So when I was in Kuwait in 2014, we had breakfast with the host nation and their military. So, and that was an honor. Not everybody got to do that. So when we went there, we were told that the Kuwaiti military would be standing there, and we would greet them, and we would go in a line and just do a good morning and handshake and everything. But they told us women that they would not shake our hands. So we were to do a verbal greeting only, and not to stick our hand out.
Wow.
Because they wouldn't shake it. And that was fine. That's just part of that cultural awareness. So I didn't take offense to it, because we're in their country. So I was totally okay with it.
Well, the world's different outside the United States, and very few people understand that. It's one of the things I love about our listeners here on their Honor Across Arms podcast. I'm joined today by my esteemed guest, Linda LITTRELL. They don't understand that outside the United States, things don't operate normally the way that we think they do, right?
Right.
So that cultural awareness is a huge piece that our military does a great job, in my opinion, of training our personnel on, hey, here's some things to expect.
Right.
Here's some things you should not do.
Right.
Here's some things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And, hey, go get involved with them, too.
Yeah.
In Kuwait, unfortunately, women aren't respected the way that they are in the United States, which is great in the United States that you guys are who you are. And the Me Too movement that we're having now is so tremendous, and I love seeing that. Women should be treated equally, and in my opinion, should be above us as men.
Well,
but in other countries, they don't view you all that way. And that's something that we have to be aware of from a military standpoint.
Right. And that was a stark reality that I had always seen on computer-based trainings, but had never experienced. So to see it in person and to see them the way they looked at us was just it was just a means to make me more grateful to our nation and to our equality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How did that make you feel? How, when you're walking down this line and the men in another country, they won't acknowledge you or won't respect you, and they don't give you the respect that you deserve. Mm-hmm. How'd that make you feel?
Being a guest in their country, it did not bother me at all. I did not take offense to it, because we're guests in their country. So I was humbled as such, and just grateful to be able to go to the breakfast and to have their unique cuisine, and just to be in the room with them,
So it was a great experience, nonetheless.
It was. The
Absolutely.
food was great. The atmosphere was great. And just that small part, and again, it comes down to training and awareness and understanding that it's not to take it personal, that's that's their beliefs, that's their culture.
Well, and I think that's a great point, because had you not been trained and had you not been aware of that, you probably would have, reacted completely different.
Yeah, that's true.
And you can say pissed. It's okay.
Yeah, I'd have been pissed.
We're on a podcast. We're not PG.
It would have been a much different reaction, but I was prepared. Again, we get trained on most circumstances that we may come in contact with, so that helps.
Absolutely. A lot. So you were in Italy. How many years did you do there?
I did 3.5 years there.
And then you went where?
I went to Turkey from there, which is considered a short tour. And with short tours, they're 12 to 15 months, and you get to pick a follow-on as a incentive to doing this short tour.
All right, so before we get to that follow-on, tell us a little bit about Turkey. How was that? What was that experience like?
I was in Turkey from 2003 to 2005, and at the time, our country had gone to war or invaded Iraq with Iraqi freedom, and they were looking for Saddam. So that was the
main mission at that point.
It was, and I was very aware that Turkey borders Iraq. Turkey is the northern country bordering Iraq. We had Operation Northern Watch at the time, but once Iraq was invaded, Northern Watch stopped, and it just became a different mission. So it was kind of it was just uncertain times. They didn't know where Saddam was. But nonetheless, it was a beautiful country, and we again had the welcome, the week-long welcome, and the cultural norms, and the language awareness, and we eventually, once they captured Saddam and they lifted the base lockdown, we were able to go out into the economy and really experience the country, which was beautiful.
So that base lockdown, so our listeners understand, that means that you're not allowed to go off base. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you were stuck here on this military installation in a beautiful country, as you mentioned earlier. Some of the sites that are available in Turkey, what are some of the things that you were able to get once they lifted that ban of you being, allowed off base? What were you able to see? What were some of the sites you saw there?
There were so many. If you're familiar with the Bible and Christian faith, which I'm not really, but I'm familiar with some of the characters of the Bible or persons of the Bible. John the Baptist, his home birthplace is there. Ephesus is there, and I visited that. That's the last known place that Mary went after the crucifixion of Jesus. They believe Noah's Ark is up on Mount Arafat, and there's just all kinds of castles to see, and there's something called what are they called? The fairy chimneys in Cappadocia. Turkey is just beautiful.
So you're talking about history right there. And when we, as United States citizens, talk about history, we're talking about 200, 250 years, right? 300 years at the most. And we think we're this big historic country and we're proud of our history and all this stuff. But you get to Turkey, you get to Italy, we're talking about Roman times. We're talking about thousands of years going back. And these buildings that have been standing for thousands of years, too. What is that like? When you go from Pennsylvania, from Reading, Pennsylvania, where you see railroads, right, to now you're seeing true history.
Right.
Did you, at that time, you were a little bit younger, did you understand what that history meant?
That's a deep question, Joshua.
Well, we get into the deep issues
I know.
here on Honor Across Arms podcast.
You're good. Heck, you don't ask me this stuff in our day-to-day life.
It's about exploring the other options.
It is. And you make a good point. I never really drawn that conclusion before, but yeah, coming from Podunk, Reading, I shouldn't say Podunk. I love my city where I'm from, but ended up, and I did go to Rome and see the Colosseum and tour around it, and I was so young at 19, 20 at the time, and you can't really appreciate how just how magnificent it is that these structures have been there for that long. And